June flower, in Jesus' name. Chapter 13. Walking across the beach out back of the Keno estate, Jason took a moment to let the cool morning breeze soothe his soul. His heart ached. It was his fault Eric and Shelley had been taken. He should never have given permission to allow the agents assigned to Keno Home Security to attend Jeffy's homecoming. If they hadn't had his permission, they never would have left the house when Eric insisted they go ahead. Jason knew that a mood of celebration was a time for an enemy strike. How he'd let himself be sucked in. Well, that was it, wasn't it? He'd let himself be sucked into the celebration. He'd let Eric's and Shelley's joy in having their daughter finally come home override what he knew was best. Eric was the one who taught him that. Still, Jason couldn't hold Eric responsible. It was Eric's child's coming home, not Jason's. He was the one who should have been able to keep his head. He'd gone home for a few hours, tried to console his wife, who was Shelley's best friend, but Angel had been inconsolable. He'd left her sleeping this morning with a promise from Kimmy that she would stay with her. He shook his head as he thought of Angel's lamentations throughout the night. When Angel and Shelley had first met, Angel had been jealous of Shelley. She hadn't been able to see what Eric saw in her. Angel admits that she'd been downright mean, yet Shelley had seen past all that to the insecure and lonely girl underneath Angel's glamorous front. Angel said that Shelley had been the first person in her life who'd befriended her out of pure love, not to be popular, not for attention, not for any shallow reason, just because she thought Angel was worthy of being loved. Since then, they'd always been there for each other, a quiet, calm rock of a friendship that would never end. Though Shelley would scoff at the notion it was through Shelley that Angel had learned true self-esteem and had paid it forward 1,000-fold through her campaigns against domestic violence and battered woman syndrome. Jason breathed a sigh and redirected his mind toward his purpose for being here. Even though he'd worked beside the FBI yesterday, combing the crime scene for any evidence, he wanted another look at the beach, hoping there was something he missed. Unfortunately, he found nothing new. Before coming outside, he'd gone over the house again. Nothing. Whoever took Eric and Shelley did so quickly. They didn't go into any other part of the house. They came in both front and rear doors. They fought with both Eric and Shelley in the dining room and kitchen and left immediately out the rear door. Evidence on the beach and exterior video supported what Jeffy said happened from in her psychic trance. Running a hand through his hair, he looked up as Agent John Sweet came down from the house. He'd arrived on the plane yesterday in need of some R&R and instead had immediately resumed working. Jason made a mental note to give him a bonus. "I'm sorry to disturb you, sir, but Special Agent Moore has arrived and wants to speak with you," John said. Jason nodded. "I'm on my way." He gave a last glance around and headed up toward the house. Inside, Jason quickly took note of his own agents. As directed, they'd stationed themselves throughout the main floor, keeping watch over all the activities taking place. Jason had worked so often with the Bureau that there was no questioning of his presence or that of his employees, especially in this circumstance concerning the Kenos. Special Agent Moore met him as he came through the dining room glass doors, his hand extended. "You were up early this morning," he said. Jason nodded. "I couldn't sleep. Thought I might come over and see if there was anything we missed." "And?" Jason shook his head. "Nothing." "And would you have told me if you had found anything?" Jason smiled. "Probably. Well, maybe." Moore nodded, appreciating the honesty. "Well, we'll be finished processing and cleaning this mess up sometime today. I want the family back in the house as soon as possible. I don't want the kidnappers to try to contact them anywhere else." Jason nodded. "I'll let them know." Both men turned to the disturbance coming from the front foyer and headed that way. "I didn't do nothing, man. Let me go." An FBI agent held a young man, his arm twisted behind his back. The man appeared to be no more than 20. long blonde hair, scruffy beard, lean, wearing blue jean shorts and a dirty yellow t-shirt advertising suntan lotion. Another agent stepped forward. He tried to deliver this out of the gate and take off. I didn't do nothing wrong, the boy argued. Special Agent Moore donned gloves and opened the brown envelope carefully. He removed several 8x10 photos and a lengthy letter. He studied each picture before he passed it on to Jason, saving the letter for last. Jason had to work at keeping his professional demeanor. If the photos had had that effect on him, he couldn't even imagine what they were going to do to the family. Eric was anchored to a wall, his arms caught in high-tech irons. He wore only gray slacks with no belt. His feet and torso were bare. Rivulets of blood ran from a cut on his face and coursed down his chest. His eyes were open and he appeared alert. However, it was the balled fists, the tension in his jaw, and the braced stance of his legs that got to Jason. The tiger, ready to spring if he got the chance. In this case, he supposed it was if the photographer got close enough. The next picture was much worse. Shelley lay face down, unconscious. She wore only a white bra, white slacks, and white tennis shoes. The third picture was also of Shelley. She'd been turned over onto her back, eyes closed, face swollen, blood tracked from her nose and mouth down to her neck to soak into her white bra. It was obvious she'd taken quite a beating. Whether that beating took place here in this house or was subsequent altercation, he didn't know. Jason looked up at the guy who'd brought the pictures. I'm assuming you don't know anything about these. Jason purposely allowed the boy to see what he'd brought. The boy's face paled. I didn't know. I mean, the guy just asked me to deliver them. He gave me $100. It's in my pocket. You have to believe me. I do, Jason said, hoping to calm him. He would be able to give them more information if he was calm enough to think straight. Try to get some prints off the money, Special Agent Moore said to one of the agents. Search, secure, and sit him down. We have some questions for him. Question him all you want, Jason thought. He won't know much of anything. Moore waited for them to take the boy into the other room before he looked over the letter and then, sighing, handed it to Jason. Jason read it slowly, and when he reached the end, he couldn't help the two-word prayer that escaped his lips. Dear Jesus. New scene. He'd been sure he'd be the only one up and on the beach at sunrise, and yet as he limped down close to the water, he saw Jeffy and Cam stretching out. He nodded his head in a slight bow, and they started toward him. As they neared, Ricky smiled at them. I'd be honored if you would join me. Both Jeffy and Cam bowed. The honor would be ours, they said in unison. Jeffy and Cam glanced quickly at each other as if surprised they'd both used the same words. But Ricky wasn't surprised at all. His eyes moistened. They'd used the same words because they'd been taught by the same man, his father. The threesome turned when they saw movement behind them. They smiled. Coming down to the beach were Mark and Joey, and Jojo, Logan, and young Eric, and John, Jody, and Jacob Apple. Ricky offered the same greeting to them as they neared. When the entire group uttered the same response, he couldn't keep the tear from coursing down his cheek. Will you do us the honor of leading? John asked. Ricky nodded and bowed slowly before he led the group. I'll do my best. Legs a little gimpy. Your best is good enough, John replied. Ricky led them through a combination of the Kino personal daily stretch and salutation, morning routines, Tai Chi Chuan, and ended in the usual prayer and meditation. This morning the prayer was done by holding hands in a circle. They had all knelt in their personal family morning prayers, but the moment of these warriors coming together on the beach and the strong feeling of connection to God had to be taken. When they finished their meditation, they rose from the lotus position and bowed to each other. What is that awesome smell coming from the house? Joey asked. Maddie wanted to cook for you this morning, Jody answered. Cook for this giant group? She shouldn't be doing that. Are you kidding me? She's in her element. She says there's not much in this world that can't be helped by a meal cooked with loving hands. Well, I'm inclined to believe that she's right about that. I intend to go up there and show Miss Mattie some gratitude, Ricky said with a nod. They made their way up to the house and walked in through the large open patio doors and were enveloped in a cacophony of sights and smells and sounds. Amazing aromas, babies chattering, and beautiful, freshly showered women talking softly. Jeffy stood just inside the kitchen door and watched as Ricky found Bree and kissed her. Mark headed straight to Em in her high chair and kissed the baby, and then the baby's mother. Joey performed almost the same thing, but added the hug of an adorable 3-year-old to the mix. Jojo approached Lena. Young Eric spoke to the Anderson twins, and Logan tickled his baby sister, Emily. Jody, John, and Jacob began taking directions from Maddie, getting down stacks of plates, finding orange juice, pulling glasses from the dishwasher. Jeffy had longed for this for the past year and a half. She let the sounds of normalcy wash over her, listening with her heart to the little nips of conversation. It's pepper gravy. It's a southern thing. Try it. You'll like it. I love the smell of your shampoo. What kind is it? Hot sauce on eggs? No, hardly slept at all. Just some strawberries for me. Yes, scratch right here. Oh, thank you. That's much better. The fluffiest pancakes I've ever tasted. Green smoothies. Miss Mattie, you've thought of everything. I don't care right now how fattening it is. I need to pick up some clean underwear at the store if they don't let us back in over at the other house. What time is Grace's and Brody's plane coming in today? Biscuits and gravy? Oh, Miss Mattie, you rock. Where's Grandma? I want Grandma. Jeffy's heart took a tumble. She watched as Bella crooned soft words to Emily, who demanded to see her grandmother. Suddenly, the room was silent. It was Jason's voice who broke the silence. Rick, need to see you. Ricky looked up from the plate he held in his hand as he leaned against the counter, eating fruit and eggs. He placed his plate on the counter and headed toward the living room. Jason nodded at everyone, finding who he needed to find. Joey, Mark, Keegan, Jeff, Cam, you too. Bree rose. Don't even think about leaving Jeffy and me out. Jason hesitated and then finally nodded. Fine. As for the rest of you, I'll leave it to your significant others to fill you in, he said as he followed Bree and Jeffy into the living room. In a large formal living room, which looked more like an open rotunda with white chairs, glass tables, and crystal chandeliers, the group stood anxiously waiting for Jason to spill what news he had. Better sit down, Jason said to Bree. Both Bree and Jeffy took a seat in the comfy upholstered chairs that sat at opposite sides of the seating area. Jason held up a folder. We received these this morning. A kid was paid to deliver them. He gave us a description of the man. Not too helpful. FBI is running tests on the original envelope and contents. These are copies. He handed the folder to Ricky. Bree, used to studying facial expressions, didn't bother to watch for Ricky's reaction. She knew he would be stone-faced, which was telling in itself. She watched the others as they looked at the pictures. Ricky passed the folder to Mark. His only reaction was running a hand through his hair. Joey was next. Nothing from him. Bree held out her hand. Joey eyed her as he placed the folder against her palm. She opened the folder and immediately began to cry. She passed the folder up to Keegan, who stood by her side. He cursed. Keegan passed it to Jeff. He sighed. Jeff passed it to Cam. Nothing. Finally, Cam walked it to Jeffy and knelt down in front of her and handed her the folder. Jeffy opened the folder slowly. There was a sharp, indrawn breath. Her fingers reached to trace the outline of her mother's and father's bodies, and after a long while, she looked up at Jason. They're okay. He raised a brow. I mean, emotionally. They're okay, I think. Yeah, they're okay. They're not afraid. They know I'm... She stopped. You're what? Jason asked. Nothing. I mean, for some reason they know everything is going to be okay. Is this all they sent? They didn't send any demands? Yes, they sent demands. He opened his jacket and took a sheaf of papers from his pocket. They sent this letter. He passed out as many copies of the letter as he had, leaving Cam and Jeff to wait. The room was silent while they read the script of a madman. Come to me, June Flower. I'm waiting. Together we will certainly change the world. More likely, rule it. I feel I must exonerate myself. I was not the one who tried to push you off the bridge. I was not the one who used explosives to obliterate you in your tent while you slumbered peacefully. How wonderful to find that you were not where you were supposed to be that night, even though there was collateral damage, namely, those children you fancied yourself in love with. You simply must feel the joy of being alive. The world needs you. Loxall did not understand this, but I do. I'm sorry about your parents, truly. It's regrettable that I had to resort to such lengths to get your attention and have you take me seriously. Did you know I tried to email you? Many times, actually. You must change your email address quite often, for it always bounced back to me. It was frustrating, to say the least. It almost seemed a personal affront. I could be hurt. I won't be. I'm sure this little episode, the taking of your parents, is certainly revenge enough for the slight you gave me. But really, my love, I am not seeking revenge. I am seeking so much more than something as trivial as revenge. I realize the FBI and Ameritech people are perusing these words meant only for you, so I will have to keep the rest of my plans for you a secret. One day, however, you will stand alongside me and our children and laugh at their efforts to stop us. So, you must, of course, come to rescue your parents. I'm afraid I had to allow my man to mistreat them a bit, just so you know that I can be ruthless. Ah, but Payne, he is much more than ruthless. He is much more ruthless than I. Sometimes I think he is a little off balance, if you know what I mean. For now, your parents are safe. But if I feel you are dawdling or enlisting help, they will be submitted to much worse than what appears in these photographs. I'm sure you are wishing me to get straight to the instructions, but then this time that I've waited so long for would be over. And I'm so happy to finally be communicating with you that I want to play a game of sorts. I'm sure you've heard that brilliant minds think alike. I want to see just how alike we are. Solve the equation below to discover where you must go and when in order to be given transportation to see your loved ones. Jeffy eyed the equation quickly, then went on to read the last few paragraphs. It will take you some time to solve the equation, Dr. Kino. Take care that you work quickly and beat the feds, for if they accompany you to the meeting place, you will never see your parents again. Once you arrive at the correct place at the correct time, you will see 4 black GMC Yukons circling the area. Get in one. The others will provide both cover and decoy. Don't get your hopes up. I've chosen the location well. It would be extremely difficult to have surveillance. Any sign of feds or Ameritech or even local cops, and we will call the whole thing off, and you could say goodbye to your parents. I know that's not what you want. Oh, by the way, here's a key. K equals 2 over 2 pi. While I'm waiting, I've decided to do some genetic testing on your parents. After all, they must be very special people to have created such an amazing specimen of a human being. You are human, Juneflower, are you not? Sometimes even I myself wonder. When you have solved the equation and have come alone to the place indicated, you will be whisked away to join me. Your parents are here. Once you have agreed to all the things I've planned for us, they will be released. I swear it. I am a man of my word. Ah, Juneflower, I feel myself in the throes of passion as I envision meeting you for the very first time. My body and mind thrum with a vibration that only you can answer. I wait patiently for you to take your place on the symbolic throne beside me. Humbly and most sincerely yours, TBA. The equation was written down below. This guy is freaking wacko, Joey said vehemently. Which makes him even more dangerous, Jason stated calmly. He expects Jeffy to have his babies, Bree uttered, almost to herself. He's completely out of his mind. Jeffy stood abruptly. May I have your pen? She asked Jason. He reached inside his breast pocket and handed her a pen. Jeffy reached out and grabbed the letter Ricky was holding, placed it in face down on the glass coffee table, sat down on the floor, and began scribbling madly. Mark looked over her shoulder, then back up at everyone else's questioning stares. She's working on the equation. Cam started out of the room. Where are you going? Jeff asked. To get more paper, a computer, a calculator, and some pencils, he answered as he left. Probably easier to go back to my office, Ricky said. Cam nodded and rather than speak to her, merely lifted Jeffy up and carried her back. So, Ricky said to Jason, what do you think about this? Jason shook his head. I think the man is unstable, extremely dangerous, and he has a man working for him that even he believes to be ruthless. That makes me uncomfortable, to say the least. Well, how long do you think we really have before he lets this guy loose on Dad and Shelley again? Jason shrugged. He's given Jeffy some time to work this equation, so whatever some time means. 2 days, 24 hours. He says he's going to do genetic testing. That takes time, right? Your guess is as good as mine right now. We need to ask Jeffy how much time she thinks it will take to solve the equation. Ricky nodded and ran a hand through his thick black hair. Okay. Jason's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing. Dad, Jojo asked from the doorway. Everyone is on pins and needles, waiting to hear what the news is. Mark nodded. Do me a favor, Jojo. Have everyone assemble in the den, but ask Taylor if she'll take the little ones downstairs to the playroom. Jojo nodded. Yes, sir. What constitutes a little one? Everyone younger than Taylor. Yes, sir. Mark raised his eyebrows at Joey. Let's fill them in. Joey nodded. He reached down and pulled Bree to her feet. Solemn-faced, she joined the rest as they moved to the den. Jason went along and watched the group as they were briefed on the news and made himself available to answer any questions. The initial shock ended, questions asked and answered, and the pictures were being mulled over when Jason pulled his brother aside to have a private word with him. They stepped into a corner of the living room. Do I look stupid to you? Jason asked when he had Justin alone. Stupid? No. Why? Not one time has one person in this family come to me to ask me what the plan is or what the FBI or I intend to do about this problem. Okay, Justin said slowly. And that means they haven't asked because they already have a plan of their own. The light went on in Justin's eyes. Ah, I see what you're saying. So, just what do you think they have planned? Well, if it's something they don't want me to know about, then it's something I would disagree with. Like? Probably like using Jeffy to lure the kidnappers out. I can't imagine they would do that. They would never put Jeffy in danger. No, not usually. Their grief, though, is palpable, and they don't have it in them to sit idly by when they are all so fierce and capable. I think that grief blinds them, and I don't think they'll be thinking clearly enough to realize the risks of putting Jeffy out there. So, do you intend to stop them? Jason thought for several moments before he answered. No, I'm not sure I can stop them. Instead, I think I'll be their backup. An outside watcher can see things from a different perspective. Justin nodded. I will have a word with Ricky, though, and put in some kind of contingency plan in case things go wrong. He sighed. Just do me a favor and keep your eyes and ears open, Jason said. I want to know their plans, if at all possible. He smiled then. So, I don't look stupid. Justin smiled. Not in my eyes, little bro. New scene. Eric rose the second the door whooshed open, but as before, men moved in quickly, weapons drawn. Shelley took down the piece of Eric's shirt he'd wet in the bathroom and had her holding to her swollen eye. She stood shakily, watching as the man named Payne pressed a sequence of keys and opened the small panel box by the door. A few seconds later, the door on the wall opened, and the two other men holstered their weapons and grabbed Eric by each arm. He didn't resist. He didn't dare for fear that they would retaliate using Shelley. They pushed his arms up over his head until they slid into the cuffs. Payne pushed a button, and once again the cuffs shut tightly. Payne moved forward, smiling at Eric. Tell me, how does it feel? Being so helpless, I mean. You're not used to that, are you, Grand Master Kino? Eric thought quickly about why Payne would slowly enunciate his title. It would be because he resented it or envied it, which means he coveted respect himself and had not received it. Payne drew back and punched Eric in the stomach. Eric had been able to tighten his diaphragm in time. Still, he grunted as if he were in pain, thinking it would give the man some satisfaction. Answer my question, Payne commanded. How does it feel being so helpless? Eric nodded. Why don't you tell me? Payne's eyebrows rose. What did you say? Why don't you tell me how it feels to be helpless? Eric repeated. Shelley whimpered, and Eric glanced in her direction. The look of fear on her face was not for herself, but for him. But she didn't realize that he needed to show some strength, or there would be a free-for-all. He tried to communicate with her through his eyes, to let her know it was okay. But the next punch grazed his jaw and made him slightly dizzy. Payne moved close, the small smile on his face making Eric nervous. You're about to feel completely helpless, Payne said softly. He turned abruptly. Bring her. Shelley screamed as one man attempted to grab her around the waist. She elbowed him in the nose and had him doubling over. She fought with the second man, evading capture for a minute until the first man recovered and helped. Each grabbed one of her arms and began dragging her from the room. No, she screamed, using her feet to catch against the door jamb and propel them back into the room. They jerked her upright, twisted her arms behind her back until she became still and dragged her from the room. Let me go, she growled. Eric! Payne eyed Eric, enjoying the way the man's body was taut with tension as he stood bound to the wall. Giving him a mock salute, Payne stepped out of the room. The door hissed shut. Eric felt sick, hearing Shelley's screams cut off abruptly as the soundproof door closed. Payne was absolutely correct. He felt completely helpless. Yet, even bound to a wall, there was something he could do. He would use the power of his mind and the gifts God gave him. New scene. They pushed her roughly down the corridor. It seemed to go on forever. Shelley tried to remember her way back to Eric, just in case, by some stroke of luck, she escaped. The walls were gray, but at the end of the corridor, she saw a yellow infinity symbol on an exposed steel beam higher up on the wall. There were no windows, making her think they were underground. They turned right and walked to the end of the next corridor where elevator doors awaited. Once inside the elevator, Shelley glanced at the buttons. 6 floors. Where in the heck was she? Wherever it was definitely a modern, state-of-the-art structure. She glanced up at Payne, who stood silently by the door. Where are you taking me? He glanced down at her as if he hadn't realized she was there. He didn't bother to answer. The door opened and she was pushed forward. This corridor was carpeted in stripes of blues and grays. There were several doors along the way, and the small signs on the wall next to the doors had her trembling in fear. Radiology, Lab 3, Forensics, Pre-op. She stopped and tried to pull away. Please let me go, she begged. They jerked her forward and opened a large door and dragged her through. A woman behind the glass in a white lab coat motioned them forward. Bring her back, she said as she pushed a buzzer and a door unlocked. Shelley struggled against their hold. They had to drag her kicking and screaming through the door. Take her in the dressing room and get her ready, the woman ordered. Payne nodded at the 2 men who held Shelley. Tightening their hold, they pulled her behind the large curtain. It was all a blur. Shelley fought with her last ounce of strength as the two men removed her clothes from her body, and together they held her still enough to thread her arms through the sleeves of a blue hospital gown, turning it so that it opened in the front. She fought hard, not bothering to even try to stop the tears that ran down her cheeks. She screamed, she cursed, she begged. They lifted her off the floor and slammed her onto a large gurney. One man practically sat on top of her to keep her down while the other strapped her right arm down by her side. When he finished, the other strapped down her left arm, and once she was secure, they backed off, breathing hard. Frickin' witch is a wildcat, man. The other didn't answer. He did, however, wipe at the lines of blood oozing from his cheek where Shelley had scratched him. Moving toward her now that she was restrained, he leaned closer. Look, lady, I don't blame you for being upset, but you can stop kicking. You ain't going nowhere. He's not going to hurt you. You aren't going to feel a thing. Who? She screamed. What are you talking about? What are they going to do to me? The woman came back through the curtain. She'd changed into blue scrubs. Helped me get her feet up in the stirrups. Shelley blinked hard at what she just heard. There was a buzzing in her head, and she realized she might pass out. The bottom of the gurney was broken away, and large stainless steel stirrups were attached. Shelley was so exhausted she barely even tried to resist. It was futile, and she knew it. The men secured her legs up in the stirrups and then were dismissed. The woman wheeled her down a short, beige-colored hallway with pictures of leaves and frogs and bees and fetuses along the walls. She was pushed through a double swinging door. Shelley's eyes blinked hard as she peered around the room. It seemed she was in some sort of operating room. The gurney came to a halt in the very center of the room. The woman touched a button on the side of the bed, and it rose. The woman then rolled over a tray of supplies and began to administer an IV. Please, why are you doing this? Shelley cried, but the woman pretended like she didn't even exist. Calm yourself, a man's voice said softly as he walked briskly into the room. Shelley eyed him warily. He was a slim man with black hair, black mustache, and dark eyes, maybe 40-ish. He, too, wore blue scrubs. Who are you? Shelley demanded. What do you want with me? He smiled kindly. I know this may be a little frightening, though from watching you downstairs, I was beginning to think that nothing scares you. As your husband has already told you, it's your daughter I want, not you. Still, in the meantime, I'm going to run some tests on you and your husband to see how you were able to produce such an amazing offspring. Tests? What kind of tests? We're going to remove some of your eggs. My eggs? Are you out of your mind? He only smiled at her. Even I know you can't just remove eggs. It takes time. I would have to take hormones for several weeks. He frowned, her words stinging his ego. Oh, that procedure is what the rest of the world uses and is outdated. I am Dr. Julian Black, a renowned geneticist. He smiled at her. Now, don't you worry. You won't feel a thing. I've had your medical records imported and... My medical records? You can't do that. He smiled again. Mrs. Keno, I think you will find that I can pretty much do anything I want. No one is the wiser. This facility is mine, built by my people, operated by my people, all handpicked. Security is tight. No one comes in and no one goes out without my knowledge. Now, as I was saying, I've been over your medical records and I was tickled to find that you are only now beginning with your perimenopause state. That means you still have eggs with which I can play with. You are quite a specimen yourself, he said, running his hand over her neck and probing her glands. I'm not a specimen, you jerk. I'm a person. He smiled again, and Shelley found herself wanting to rip his face off. Oh, no, Shelley Keno. You're much more than a person. He shone a light in her eyes. Keep your eyes still and look right here, he said, pointing to the bridge of his nose. Go to hell, she said, moving her eyes around rapidly. He only chuckled. Your spirit is indomitable. I find that very attractive. Open your mouth, he said, pressing so hard on her chin that she had to obey. Good, he mumbled. He produced a stethoscope and began listening to her heart. He continued a thorough exam until he finally nodded at the woman in scrubs. Go ahead and put her under. I don't think she's going to be very cooperative. No, Shelley said quickly. I'll cooperate, I promise. He shook his head. Too late. Don't worry. I won't have too much fun with your remarkable body. Besides, it's for the best. Some of the procedures are somewhat painful. Shelley couldn't help the tears that welled in her eyes, and the woman put a syringe into the IV line, and that was the last thing she remembered. New scene. Ricky wandered around the house. There was something he was missing, but he couldn't put his finger on it. He'd been over and over all the facts in his head until his eyes crossed. Sighing, he slumped down in the den, thankful that he was presently alone. The rest of the household had dispersed into different areas. It was only 10 in the morning, just a few hours since Jeffy had begun working on the equation. He wanted to ask her how it was going, but was afraid of breaking her concentration. Ricky scooped up the pictures still lying on the table in the den and stared at them. It was hard to grasp. These weren't just pictures. His father truly was being held against his will. Shelley truly had bruises on her face, the result of some man's fist. Some dead man's fist, Ricky thought, allowing the vengeful side of his personality to take over briefly. No, he couldn't think like that. His father would tell him to concentrate on the solution. But what was it? His father was restrained, attached to a wall by some heavy-duty cuffs, just like Jeffy had told them in her vision. Next to him, several shelves of nasty-looking instruments of torture sat on a row of metal shelves. Jeffy had said they appeared to be floating beside him. It must have been difficult for her to see the actual shelves. Still, she'd done a darn good job of describing the circumstances. Her psychic abilities were definitely real. Suddenly, he sat up. She'd done a darn good job. As a matter of fact, she'd been right on. He needed to integrate that fact. Jeffy's talent was not just a quirk. All her life, they talked about her being psychic. They'd played around with it. They'd exercised it. But they'd never really tried to use it. They'd merely accepted it. But if they truly believed she was psychic, then they needed to act like they believed by using her abilities here and now. He rose quickly, grimacing at the stiffness in his thigh, and gathering the pictures, he called his son, Eric. It took only a few seconds before he heard footsteps pounding from the back of the house where the theater room was located. Yes, sir, Eric said breathlessly. Jojo, Logan, and Jacob appeared behind him. Gather everyone together. We're going to have a psychic session with Jeffy. A psychic session? Cool. Where you want everyone? Let's do the living room. Move all the furniture aside. I'll go talk to Jeffy. Yes, sir, the boys all said together. I'll go move the furniture, Jacob offered. I'll help you, Jojo said. Logan, you and Eric go round up the troops. They took off. Ricky made his way back to the office where Jeffy was working feverishly. When he opened the door, she frowned up at him. Cam, who sat in a chair working on a laptop, glanced at Ricky before he spoke to Jeffy. She says she's driving, but will get right on it the moment she gets to her office. Jeffy nodded, then looked at Ricky. Yes? How's it going? She frowned. Not well. I'm calling in favors. Cam was just emailing Marie Laughlin and Pedro Cortez. They were in my counseling group for misunderstood brainiacs. They're going to help with the equation as soon as they can get to a computer. Misunderstood brainiacs? Right. Listen, Jeffy, I hate to interrupt you, but I think I have an idea. Shoot. I want you to come sit in the center of our group and try to get a reading on Dad and Shelley. Jeffy frowned. Been there, done that. And you were right on. What you described was exactly what was in the photos. I feel strongly about this, Jeffy. You've never really tried to harness your talent, your power, whatever you want to call it. You're psychic, Jeffy, in more ways than one. You're talking about trying to do a remote viewing type thing? Yeah, maybe, only remote viewers usually don't have a connection to their subjects. I'd say you have a strong connection to Mom and Dad, especially since you and Dad have actually played mind games together. Jeffy, I think with everyone's help we can up the frequency, like we did yesterday. And you just might be able to get a fix. I'm thinking you can try to tune into their minds. Isn't that what you do when you do your mind melding thing? So what if they're not sitting right beside you? We're all made of particles of energy, right? Not just our physical bodies, but our spirits, right? And if that's true, then we're all connected anyway, right? Jeffy nodded. Yes, that's what I believe, and what quantum physics is now proving. Well, then it doesn't matter if they're standing right next to you or are halfway around the world. You can join your mind to theirs. I think you should probably go with Dad, since his mind is probably a little more calm than Shelley's is right now. Will you give it a try? She sighed. Yes, I'll try anything. I'm certainly not going to waste time arguing with you about whether it will work. Let's do it. I needed a break anyway. Go ahead and call everyone together. It's done. We're just waiting on you. Jeffy rose and reached out to Cam. Are you in? He took her hand. You don't even have to ask that. The three entered the living room the group had assembled. Some sat cross-legged, some assumed the lotus position. Most of them had their eyes closed as Jody led them through a light-gathering prayer and meditation. Light meaning the light of God, the light of Christ, the light of love. Jeffy moved forward and took her position in the center of the group. I just want to say thanks to all of you for believing in me and for helping me to try this. Ricky's right. I've never really tried to harness this gift I've been given. Well, in your defense, Jeffy, Bree said with a soft chuckle, you've been concentrating on healing the world. Jeffy smiled at her older sister. Thanks, Bree. I love you. I love you too, baby girl. Maybe I should take the little ones off to another room, Lisa Stewart suggested. Ricky shook his head. No, children are the most pure and hold the most light. Suffer the children to come unto me, he quoted. I think they'll be okay. If they get real fussy, you can take them out, but let's let them try. Everyone nodded. Ricky took over for Jody, leading everyone through a deep meditation, asking them to bring the light of Jesus Christ into their bodies through the crowns of their heads, directing it to their hearts to be filled with love, then sending it out their arm through their hands and into Jeffy. The room grew warm quickly. Someone began to hum softly, a childhood song about sunshine, which lightened everyone's mood and caused some smiles. I know that song, little Sophia said in her adorable munchkin voice, making some of the grown-ups laugh. Ricky smiled, feeling the room fill up with love. And then all were quiet. Jeffy began to breathe hard. I can see, Dad. He's still restrained. His legs are tired, so tired. She gasped. He's calling to me with his mind. He's been calling to me. Mama's been taken away from him, and he doesn't know where she is, and he's worried about her. But I'm not to think about that. He's trying to push those thoughts aside. He can feel me. He knows I've tuned into him. He doesn't know where he is. It took them several hours to get there. He thinks they're in an underground facility. He's going to try to find out more about where they are. She shook her head. He's repeating everything. Can you put thoughts in his head? Can you project? Ricky asked. I'll try. What do you want me to say? Tell him we're coming for him. Give him the information from the letter. The more knowledge he has, the better armed he is. Jeffy closed her eyes, concentrated hard for several minutes. I don't know if I'm getting through. Keep the light flowing, everyone, Ricky urged. Jeffy jerked upright. Oh, she whimpered softly. Are you okay? Cam whispered. Tears ran down her face. It's Mom. She's back with Dad. She's being rolled in on a gurney. She's wearing a hospital gown. She's sad and sick. She can't concentrate. I think she's sedated. She's being moved onto another gurney that's in the room. The empty gurney is being pushed out. No, it's being brought close to Dad. Her voice rose. I don't have time now, sweetie. Try to reach me again later. I should know more soon. Sorry, sweetie. Everything is going to be okay. Keep it up. You're doing good. You're doing real good. Jeffy drew a deep breath and blinked several times and finally looked up at the group. He's gone. I can't feel him anymore. New scene. Julian Black stormed back and forth across his office as Payne watched from his chair. She had to know, Black complained. She had to know I was looking forward to the press conference, and not one member of the family showed. Not one. I mean, some country singer and a dancer. They got some of their showbiz friends to represent the family. Unbelievable. He stopped and ran a hand through his hair. He needed to get control of his emotions. He'd been looking forward to seeing her on camera, see the tears course down her cheeks as she begged him to let her parents go, see her beautiful face, her amazing body, her glorious hair. He cursed, blew out a breath, stood straight, and turned to face Payne. Okay, no problem. I'll have her here with me soon enough, though I admit it makes me want to go in there and hurt the mighty Eric Kino. Still, I won't. I'll just get my samples and, well, then let me do it. Excuse me? Payne rose and went to the bar for a drink. Let me go in there and hurt him. Julian Black eyed the man as he considered the proposal. Finally, he shook his head. No, that would be crass, and I am never crass. Besides, I promised her that her parents wouldn't be hurt again unless she took too long to figure out the equation, and I like to think I'm a man of my word. The Kinos don't have a monopoly on honor. So no, I won't hurt him. He sighed. Still, the man is an amazing specimen. I will enjoy examining him. Well, I would like to make him suffer, Payne complained. Black smiled. Well, maybe I won't use anesthesia when I collect the sperm. Will that satisfy your craving for pain? Collect sperm? Why would you need to use anesthesia? Well, you usually wouldn't perform a percutaneous epididymal sperm aspiration through the scrotum without anesthesia. What's wrong with the old-fashioned way? Payne asked, pumping his fist back and forth. Nothing. Actually, it's preferable. I would retain quite a few more viable sperm, but given his being in a little bit of an emotionally upsetting situation, I don't think it's possible. Of course, there is electroejaculation using electrical stimulation, and that would also require anesthesia. Payne smiled. I don't think Kino being upset is a problem. He has complete control of his emotions. What he has is an iron will. If he doesn't want to give you a sample, he won't. Black shrugged. So, like I said, I will collect it through the scrotum. Let me try. Try what? Let me try to collect a sample from him. Black eyed the man and then gave a soft chuckle. You want to humiliate him. He shrugged. That's fine with me, Payne. If that's what you'd like to do, you go right ahead. However, if you're going to do it, I want it done right. Marilyn will explain the procedure to you. I have to have those samples under completely sterile conditions. Payne grinned. Whatever you say, you're the boss. Yes, I am, and I'll be watching. Oh, the more the merrier. New scene. Shelley awoke with a jolt as she slipped from the gurney onto the cold floor. She lay there several minutes, first experiencing the coldness and hardness of the floor beneath her cheek, and then the aches and pains in her body. Moaning, she pushed herself up to a sitting position and immediately looked for Eric. When she didn't see him, she called out for him softly, thinking he was in the bathroom. But he didn't answer. She stood, wincing at the pain in her head, her hand pressed against the wall for balance. Eric, she called louder, but didn't wait for an answer. The bile rose as nausea overtook her, and she stumbled into the bathroom and threw herself down by the toilet. Once the retching stopped, she went to the sink and cleaned her mouth. Stripping the hospital gown from her body, she used it as a washcloth, doing her best to wash her body and cleanse away the feeling of being violated. Of course, she knew that feeling was all in her mind, and she had to accept the fact that she'd let them touch her psyche, if only briefly. Though she'd fought hard, she'd let fear into her mind. She'd allowed herself to become a victim for a few minutes. She resolved to be stronger and to forgive herself, knowing that self-flagellation was just another way to be a victim. She wanted Eric and needed him and hoped desperately that he would soon be back with her. The not knowing was the worst. She finished washing, wrapped the gown around her body, and went back into the room. She went to the box by the door and started trying to punch the right button sequence, but after maybe 30 minutes of that, she grew dizzy and headed back for the gurney. Her eyes opened wide when she spotted her clothes on the gurney. Her underwear, her white slacks, her bra, and her shoes and socks, all clean and folded nice and tidy. Along with the clothes was a gray t-shirt that had a logo on the breast pocket that looked like a yellow infinity symbol and the word Gednar, Gednar. She dressed quickly. She dressed quickly and was tying her shoes when the cell door opened. Eric stood in the doorway, dressed in a blue hospital gown. His eyes grew calm the moment he saw her. He smiled at her, then stumbled forward when they gave him a shove. That's when Shelley noticed his legs had been shackled. He caught himself on his forearms and knees and turned quickly to sit on the floor against the wall. Payne nodded at Shelley with a sly smile on his face, and while the same two men who drugged Shelley from the room earlier kept their weapons trained on Eric, Payne knelt down in front of him and removed the leg shackles and the handcuffs. Grabbing both in his left hand, he held his right hand out to Eric. "It's been a pleasure," he said with a grin. "That's what they all say," Eric responded without offering his hand, making the two men with firearms laugh. Payne's face turned red with anger. Standing quickly, he moved toward the door. "When Black releases you, you're mine." Eric nodded. "I'm counting on it." Shelley watched them toss Eric's clothes on the floor and leave the room. Immediately, she threw herself in his arms. "Oh, Eric, are you okay?" He ran a hand over her face, frowning. "The question is, are you?" "I'm fine. They did something to me. They took eggs from me. They put me out." "Yeah, DNA testing, genetics testing. This guy, Julian Black, I think I've heard of him. He runs in Jeffy circles. He's some kind of high genius who's on the cutting edge of genetics. He wants to find out how we were able to procreate Jeffy. He fancies himself in love with her. He wants her to have his children. He actually thinks she'll join him." How could he possibly believe that? "He's counting on her love for us. He says if she joins him, he will allow us to live." "The man is out of his mind," Shelley said. "Doesn't he realize that Jeffy would never—" He touched a finger to her lips and leaned down and kissed her softly before he whispered in her ear, "Remember, he's listening." Jeffy nodded and breathed in the scent of the man she loved and nestled her head against his chest. He rubbed his hand over her back. "They gave you a new shirt to wear." "Yeah, nice of them, huh? Seeing as how they ripped the other one up." Eric chuckled. "How did you learn so much about this guy?" Shelley whispered. He smiled. "I cooperated." "What do you mean?" "I let them run their test. I cooperated, and in return, they didn't put me out. I struck up a conversation with both Payne and Julian Black, and I learned quite a bit." "Oh, well, what kind of test did they run?" "They examined me, they drew blood, they took urine and sperm." "Sperm? How did they—" "The usual way." She rose up and brushed her hand over his face, realizing what he'd been through. "Oh, Eric, I'm so sorry they did that to you." He smiled. "Sweetheart, listen. What have we talked about? What did you scream at them yesterday?" She sighed. "It's just a body. They can't touch your mind. You are only a victim if you allow yourself to be. But nothing. Do you think I can counsel you to think that way and not live by what I teach?" He hugged her and smiled down at her. "There's nothing for me to be ashamed of. I have a healthy body in good working condition. It's no different than if they were to cut me to make me bleed." "But how? You want me to get graphic?" She shook her head. "No, I guess not. They let your hands loose?" "No. Someone did it for me." "Who?" He was silent. "Payne?" "Yes, Payne. He thought he could get to me." "I don't understand how you did it." He shrugged. "It was either agree to that or they were going to put me to sleep, and I had to remain awake in order to get information, so I did what I had to do." "Okay, I understand that part, but I mean, I don't think I could under those conditions." He smiled. "Well, females are a little different than men. Besides, it was easy, Shelley girl. I just imagined it was you." He set her aside. "I want to get out of this hospital gown." "Let me help you," she said quickly, pushing the gown over his broad shoulders. He understood her need to help and allowed her to help him dress, and once dressed, Eric sat down and pulled Shelley into his lap. I have to tell you something. He leaned closer so that he could whisper, I think I've communicated with Jeffy. What? Shelley asked, rising up. He pulled her back down, put his finger to his lips. Telepathically. I'm pretty sure I got through. I could feel her. At least, I think I could. Shelley listened as he explained the process he used. When he finished, she felt her heart racing. We have to try again. I agree. That's why I'm telling you. We'll do it together. Hold my hands, and we'll try to contact her. And if I can give her the information I was able to get out of these guys, they might be able to find us. Anything. I'll try anything. He smiled at her. Oh, my Shelley. Have I told you lately just how much I love you? Shelley smiled at her husband. With every breath you take. Give me your hands. I don't know how much time we have before they come back. I heard them talking about actually bringing us some food. And that is the end of chapter 13.